On the other side of the world, in the green mountains of Lumbini, Nepal, sits an isolated Buddhist monastery that doubles as an orphanage. Yuqi Kang spent 1 year living with the monks. She knew that she wanted to make a documentary about the lives of these young male orphans for her master's thesis. A Little Wisdom was the result, and I had a chance to sit down with her and co-producer Amitabh Joshi at the film's Canadian premiere at the Hot Docs Film Festival this year in Toronto.
Did you find that they were receptive to you making a film when you actually ended up suggesting that?
I yes. So like after 5 or 6 months, I have my camera. I record some chanting section, and then I added those into little short films and showed them. They really were intrigued seeing themselves on the computers. So I say, let's make a longer film. I have this idea of your guys' life. I think it's really worth to show the world. And then they eventually felt that's fine. And they trust me by that. And so they gave me that access. And I have to propose that to their head monk.
Was this the first time they'd ever have been filmed this way?
Yes. So they have tourists and visitors. They sometimes take some photographs, but that's pretty much it. Nobody stayed there for that long, and nobody would. So they were really excited.
Wow. And what was your experience? I noticed that the aesthetic of the film is you really get in the faces of some of these young children. I wonder, you were doing some cinematography. What was your experience being so in their face with the camera?
Yuki very early on had a very strong vision for the film, and she wanted intimacy with these characters, and she spent a lot of time developing that relationship that afforded that closeness, because she's physically close to these people, and that's something she conveyed to us early on in the production, to me and Paula, who is also a cinematographer on the project. And it was just a matter of kind of following the kids and being there at the right place at the right time when they were doing these things and playing around.
I noticed there's one scene in the film that really stuck out to me when they're all in the tree, and they're playing, and I felt that there was a bit of an allegory to monkeys playing in a tree. Was that an intentional? To include that, and was that something you thought about?
We did think like the monkey is like the untamed mind of the untamed mind of the young children living in that monastic situation, but it's also like how their behavior really shows that they want to go out, they want to explore. So that I felt is a very symbolic. You don't need to say anything just to justify their actions. It shows like they are just children, they're untamed, and they want to go out and explore. Yeah.
I noticed that there seemed to be very little parental involvement in the in the lives of these children. Is that true, or is that just kind of how the film conveyed what was true?
In that monastery, that is their like real situation, because they only have 2 adult monks over looking after that monastery. One is more in charge of their life, another is in charge of their education. So it's a hierarchy situation when the oldest boy, like Vijay, the older character, he would take some parental role, and then the slightly older ones would take control of the youngest. So being the youngest, you are at the bottom of that hierarchy.
Yeah, and I noticed that they were really quite harsh to the youngest boy. He seemed like, I feel like they were more cruel than I've seen kids be generally. Maybe that's because they're punished for being cruel. What's your explanation of that?
I think often, because I am a female, so I see them, part of them is a male It's a small male dominant environment, and I felt that played a lot of that in there, and they don't have someone to say like you can't do that. And also I heard in Tibetan monastery it is kind of a century like tradition. It has always been like that, so it's not valued something that is wrong. It's normal for boys to be brought up that way.
Wow, that's it's a big cultural difference. Did you have any experience in terms of feeling like a cultural difference from where you were raised?
So I'm originally from Nepal, and I was raised Buddhist, and so I had experience going to monasteries from a young age. I didn't live in them, but you know, there was a reason that Yuqi chose this monastery specifically over the 40 others that are in Lumbini, because there was that. There are other monasteries like the Japanese monastery we stayed at where it is extremely strict. You have to wake up at like 4 a.m. and like clean the shrine. And this monastery, as you can see, is far more lenient. There's not as much supervision. So it's kind of, it afforded us a lot of ability to film with the kids, but I think there is a problem of monasteries not providing the education these children need. I mean, that's the biggest problem in my perspective, is that they come out of these institutions not wanting to be monks and, you know, just living a normal life, and they don't have a degree that they could use to sustain themselves. So that's a kind of a big problem.
So then, if that's the biggest problem, what would you say is the biggest benefit these kids have from being brought up there?
So a really great monk has told me once, like there's this verse in Lotus Sutra that describes the Buddhist wisdom as a one rain cloud. When it rains, like everything on the ground takes a bit of the rain. So the larger tree take a large amount of water, and the blade of grass takes smaller amount of the rain. So Buddhist teaching is like that. Like we take what we need from the Buddhist teaching, and the monk said those experience and education takes some place in the children. It will eventually come back to them, maybe later in their life when they turn adults. So I always see this in some way in a positive light. And I feel that's a quite unique and a special experience to be brought up in that environment. There are still like the positive outcome out of that. You also have to look at the condition children are living. Maybe it's a bit harsh and they don't receive much education, but the children outside of the monastery are living in a much harsher life, and they don't even have enough food at times. So in that context, those children are living much a better life than the others.
Wow. Yeah, there was a lot there. I just feel as though we could potentially learn a lesson about how to live a little bit more in connection with the earth, but we've created a society that there's no way to live in connection with the earth here, because the earth doesn't function that way. Here it functions very much in what we've created. So do you think in the future that's going to be evolving as far as cities are concerned, to create cities that are a little bit more sustainable perhaps? And is that anything that you've thought about in terms of taking away from the film?
Definitely. Like, living with them also made me contemplating on what happiness means, because for the kids, like a simple, like for their birthday, they can grant the 2 eggs for their meal. That would make their day. Like they will be really happy for those, and it just reminding me like how much I take granted for life. And like we always constantly waste food, and they have to clean their plates, and they never waste anything. And I think that's the way like everybody should do, not least like not to waste those. And there's not enough resource anyway, so I think they are really inspiring to me to take small things more precious.
It's really beautiful. I agree. Some of the other films I saw at Hot Docs this year also have this message of taking only what you need and thinking about this idea of what's enough, because we don't ever ask ourselves that question. We're just always wanting more. I know that you did this project as a thesis for your studies. PhD thesis, was it, or master's thesis? Master's thesis. Do you have any recommendations for other people who might be doing their theses right now in terms of lessons you've learned?
I think from the really early on, what really benefit me is to find some people that you share the similar visions as me. I have two other director and cinematographers. Like, we work as a team and we understand each other's needs, and we're constantly in debate and discussion on how the story would be shaped. That part really early on helped. And also like decide the length of the project that you want. I think that's really helped me to know the structure of the film and be realistic on how long I can really be there and shoot for the film. Those really helped me to see how I can structure the film, because a lot of especially for documentaries, I know some people say it's a real life event that you have to let it unfold in time, and then it's stretched to 7 years and 10 years process. Then you have to ask, as a thesis project, how much time you can put it in there. So that really helped me to find that structure within that short period of time to make because I really want to make a feature length. And so within that, I have to think what I can do to make a feature length with this amount of time.
You could have used more time. So what could change in terms of how we structure projects that so we can have projects that have the time they need to happen?
I think as a creator, you know when it's finished. So for me, at the time, I know it's finished. The only regret I have is I wish I had a little bit more time during production, because I felt I could have made it so much better. But once you have that material you work with, and that's what the basic material, you can create the structure, the sculpture, or the piece of artwork you're creating. But I think filmmaking is also very different from the other form of art. I was before doing paintings and installations. I felt that form of art is very different from filmmaking, because filmmaking constantly is a teamwork, not one person's work. So then you have to making the film and thinking of your schedule, and it involved everybody else in there. So it's really difficult. It's something I constantly debating how much time I have and how I can make the best thing that I could within that limitation. I hope in the future, though, there will be more resources for people, filmmakers, to make the thing that they want to make.
Philip Wiseman, CJRU 1280 AM.